What is up? I'm Sergeant Ballistic, but you guys can call me Brian. Thank you for checking out this video. Now, I chose to pick up the Monoprice Maker Select Plus 3D printer as my first 3D printer after quite a bit of research, primarily because it was in my price range. It was readily available from a retailer I knew and trusted, from a company whose name I knew and trusted. I was also able to get next day shipping for $20 on Amazon, and it had quite a large amount of positive reviews. Fast forward 6 months and I've used this almost day in, day out for that entire time. I've printed a ton of things, and I'm happy to say I'm pretty satisfied with my purchase. I've learned a lot printing with this machine, had quite a bit of success, some epic failures, and with that experience, I'm bringing you guys my first 3D printing review. So this is a $400 3D printer, the Monoprice Maker Select Plus, aka the Wanhao Duplicator i3 Plus, aka the Micro Center Power Spec i3 Plus, aka the Balco Touch, and aka the Cocoon Create Touch. Yeah, that's quite a bit of rebranding, but that is one of the ways that they've made this printer more widely available to people in multiple countries. And I think that's one of the reasons it's done so well in this kind of race to the bottom, very competitive space of the 3D printing market. There are dozens of companies, especially companies in China, producing different versions and different i3 Prusa clones in the same form factor with a lot of similar features for as low as like $150 for the ANET A8 kit, up to like around $600 for the actual Prusa i3 original Mark II kits, which just got a significant price reduction when the MK3 came out. And this sits kind of in the upper portion of that at $400. Wow, in terms of features, it's honestly not the most feature-rich printer in that price range. There are other printers that are less expensive than this that have the same quick build time, a lot of the same features, and larger build volumes. The one problem with those is they're not readily available on sites like Amazon, and they don't have a retailer like Monoprice rebranding them, and they're not available in a department store that you can just walk into. So I think a kid trying to get into 3D printing, trying to get his parents to buy him a 3D printer, is going to have more luck going to Micro Center with them, or Aldi with them, or pointing to one online at Monoprice or Amazon than a site like GearBest, a Chinese site that they've never even heard of. And there's just the fact that sites like GearBest are going to be waiting at least a week or two, sometimes up to a month, depending on what type of availability they have. So the printer came really well packaged with some nice dense foam, and everything was strapped together well. It also has a really good manual that takes you through the entire unboxing and setup process, and then all the way through leveling the beds, getting your first print started, and troubleshooting some problems that you might have with your first prints. Very good manual there. I was very impressed with that. I did already do an unboxing and first impressions video for this printer, and if you care to, you can go back and watch that. I'll go into more depth about the unboxing experience and the first time I set it up and some of the troubles I had. One of the great features of this printer that makes it really approachable and appropriate for people new to 3D printing like I was is its absolute ease of setup. It's a breeze to get started with, unlike printers like the ANET A8, which is a kit, and even something like the Prusa MK2 or MK3 coming out. So those are going to take you quite a bit of time to just get built. This you can get done and set up in printing in under an hour. In fact, I got it set up in printing in I think around 45 minutes, and that was while I was filming the entire process. I think the hardest parts of the first time setup for most people new to 3D printing is going to be leveling the bed. This is somewhat of an involved process initially. The first step is leveling the X-axis, and that involves getting the two Z motor lead screws to the exact same height. After that, you're going to have to level the different four corners of the bed using the screws. This doesn't have auto bed leveling, but it does have an assisted mode. I used that a couple times, but after a while, I just ended up manually moving the Y platform and the print head. This does have two Z motors, unlike a couple printers like the CR10, and a lot of people end up actually upgrading CR10 to have a dual motor setup, but some people say that can result in more accuracy across your Z-axis. You don't have to worry about the opposite side without a motor drooping a little bit. So similarly to bed leveling, getting the filament loaded initially can be a little bit troublesome. There's a button on here to help you load and unload, but again, after a while, I just started preheating the nozzle and then pulling and pushing the filaments out manually. And the hardest part is the fact that you can't see what's going on in that. So I'm gonna have a picture or some B-roll of what it looks like when this fan and this heatsink are removed, and it shows you exactly what alignment you need to have to get the filament lined in. And after you do it a couple times, again, it's gonna come really easy to you and you can do it in a matter of seconds. In terms of build quality and construction, this thing is pretty damn good. It's pretty rock solid and sturdy. It's almost an entirely steel frame, which means that you're gonna be able to print at relatively high speeds, up to like, I'd say 70 to 80 without much of a problem. One thing that does hold it back is the fact that it has a direct drive extruder, which is mounted on the ZX carriage, which means that it has to carry all that weight around, and especially at high speeds, that's going to mean it's going to have higher chances of being, having jerky starts and stops, which can detract a little bit from your print quality at those higher speeds. That steel frame does also mean that it's pretty heavy, coming in at 10 kilograms or around 22 pounds. So it's not exactly portable, but it's a bit of a trade-off between sturdiness and portability. So you have to decide whether or not which is more important for you. Overall dimensions to build ratio isn't great. It's not horrible. It's actually helped out a lot by the fact that it's got an internal control box and LCD and PSU, which reduces the footprint compared to other machines like the CR10 and older versions of this machine like the V1 and V2, which all have external control boxes, which greatly increase the overall footprint. Overall, I think that the user interface and the touchscreen are pretty good. It's fairly responsive. The menus make sense. You're able to find stuff and get through it pretty easily. I like it a whole lot better than a lot of the 2-row LCD or 4-row LCDs with rotary dial or nasty horrible push buttons. So that's very, very good. I will say beware when you have a print running, there is a stop button that you can accidentally bump into, and there's no kind of confirmation that you want to stop the print, so it'll just immediately stop it. So beware of that. If you have like a 24-hour print going and you're kind of like moving around the menu and actually hit that stop button, that would absolutely suck. For connectivity, you can actually print off of a full-size SD card. It comes with one out of the box. It also comes with a USB cable you can hook up to the USB port, meaning that you can print tethered off of either a PC or something like a Raspberry Pi. Except on the UK Balco version from Aldi, unfortunately for regulatory reasons, they weren't able to put a USB port on there. But if you are in the UK and you're a tinkerer, there is actually a controller and ports on the board. So if you want to solder in some wires or a port and Dremel out a hole for one, you can get it going, but that's up to you if you want to void your warranty. In terms of print quality, I've been very impressed with this. As I mentioned in my first impressions and unboxing video, the prints that came off the card initially were absolutely phenomenal and really, really surprised me. I thought I was going to have a little bit more trouble getting this initially set up. The 1.75 millimeter PLA that comes with it, and then subsequent PLAs I've used, just fly out of this machine. They stick really, really well to the kind of proprietary build service out of the box. This will start to deteriorate over time. You'll get gouges in it and it'll just get roughened up. You're gonna have to make a choice when that happens, what you want to do, and you've got a few different options for that. You're going to be able to either continually replace it, it's kind of a consumable, with more of the stock ones, which are a little bit harder to find online than I would like. You're also going to be able to possibly replace it with a alternative type of build surface from a company like BuildTak or PrintBite. Alternatively, with the original one, it can actually roughen up the surface with some sandpaper every once in a while and make sure that you're cleaning it really, really well with isopropyl alcohol. And this one has lasted me for 6 months without too much of problems in terms of continually having good adhesion. And the last option is that you can add or replace this surface with something like some glass. Some people have sourced that from local shops around them for very, very cheap, or you can get purpose made, I think it's like borosilicate, I'm not sure how you say that, glass online that's specifically good for 3D printing. And then a couple companies make replacement beds that completely replace this top portion of the heated bed and it has glass already embedded on it. Although the print surface and heated bed were usually enough to keep PLA stuck to the bed pretty well, I did have occasional problems with the outside edges of some larger 3D prints that took up most of the bed, kind of curling up away from the print, and that was usually fixed just by adding a little bit of glue stick on there. That can honestly get a little bit messy, but if you're having trouble with that, that can always help you out. And if you want to print with ABS, you might as well kind of get used to having to use that glue stick, as the heated bed is not enough to help ABS or PETG stick to it. You're gonna have to use a glue stick, and with the glue stick stuff like 3D benchies and little tchotchkes and stuff like that, they all stuck to the bed fine without much of a problem. When I moved to doing larger prints, that's when I noticed a little bit of trouble not having an enclosure. This tool organizer, for instance, stuck to the bed fairly well, curled up a little bit on the edges, but the big problem was that's on the side and kind of edges. It got a little bit of layer split in the lamination, not all the way through the prints, just on the edges, which was fine for this print. But if you're printing something like a structural part, or maybe something just more artistic that you want to show off and display or make a master for a mold, then you probably are going to need to have an enclosure. There's a lot of DIY options and a couple that you can buy online as well. I was able to print PEG semi-successfully, I'd say. I did have problems with it jamming, but with the glue stick, it stuck fine. I didn't try anything like PVA or HIPS or nylon, but you should be able to print them at similar temperatures to what you're going to be using for ABS. Even though this is a direct drive, I'm gonna say, even though I didn't try, you're gonna have problems printing flexible filaments. It's just, you're gonna have to swap out the extruder assembly if you want to do flexibles, but I have seen people do it. So in terms of heat up time, especially for those higher temperature materials, it was able to get to those temperatures relatively easy. It didn't take a super long time. I think that's helped out by the fact that it's 24 volts and you don't actually need a MOSFET on the bed. Some people do end up adding one just for like an extra safety precaution, but being 24 volts and the output on the motherboard, you don't need a MOSFET for it. Printers like the CR10, which is 12 volts and has an absolutely massive print bed, are known for taking quite a while to get up to the 70-75 degrees that a lot of people like to print ABS and PETG at, so keep that in mind. So overall, I'd say this is a very versatile machine capable of printing a lots of different materials with pretty good quality out of the box without having to do too many modifications. I have added a few modifications, but they're mostly just kind of like organizational, like these tool organizers and the spool holder and stuff like that. But everything isn't all peachy keen with the machine. There are a couple downsides and issues that I came across, and I'm gonna share those with you now. The first one is noise. It's a relatively loud machine compared to some other ones that I've dealt with. Some of that comes from the linear bearings, which are strangely loud compared to other machines I've dealt with. These can be replaced, as can the fans, which I say are reasonably loud. They're small 40mm fans, which tend to be louder because they have to spin faster to move the same amount of air as a larger one. I'll probably be replacing both of these. So the fan, the linear bearings combined with the sound of the stepper motors tended to max out at around 60 dB average when it's doing kind of your average type of movements. It was probably around 55 dB. With just the fan on by itself, it was at 50 dB when you just kind of power on the machine, and the baseline for the room was around 30 dB to help put that into a little bit of perspective. I wouldn't want this in a room with me while I'm sleeping, but having it next door in another room, I'd say is fine. So as you start to print a little bit more complicated and sophisticated models, some of the weaknesses of the machines will start to present themselves. One of the primary ones is cooling. The stock fan, print cooling fan and duct aren't the best, and that can be seen in prints like this, which is Maker Muse's Christmas tree, which is like a lattice style, and it's got some pretty extreme overhangs, and it just started to fail at certain points. It actually recovered quite quickly, but you can see the bottom is nice, the top is nice, but where it has some of these extreme overhangs, it just wasn't able to cool it fast enough for the print to not deform, and it kind of knocked into the nozzle and broke the print apart. That can be helped by replacing the fans and or the duct, which I do plan to do. I did notice some pretty common surface defects, and those can come from a few areas. The noisy and kind of rattly linear bearings can possibly introduce some micro vibrations, which can result in noticeable defects in the print. On top of that, these also include out of the box some kind of spring tensioners for the belts, and a lot of people say that's especially at high speeds. These can introduce a little bit of slop, which can result in things like ringing and ghosting. And I'll honestly likely be taking those off or replacing the linear bearings. So hopefully that'll clear some of those up. And a surprising number of defects can actually come from the extruder. Something like a TL smoother can help with that in terms of kind of you get some under and over extrusions from that. Doing something like a PID auto tune is also really helpful for that. And then finally, you can do a steps per millimeter calibration, which will ensure that you're extruding the exact amount of filaments that you're expecting if you're noticing some over or under extrusion. I highly recommend doing all of those mods. I did buy some TL smoothers, and I've actually put one on, and I'm gonna be doing some A/B testing in subsequent videos to show whether or not those are worth it. While you're doing that PID auto tune and extruder calibration, that's gonna require you hooking up a computer and using something like Repeater Host to change your EEPROM settings. You might as well go in and alter your max acceleration and jerk settings. These are set to like 3,000 and 1,000 respectively, and a lot of people recommend dropping those down to, I think, 1,000 and 800 respectively. So I tried to keep this printer mostly stock for evaluation purposes, but I did end up installing a Micro Swiss All Metal Hotend in this guy, and that was aimed at helping print higher temperature materials like ABS and PETG, and I can confirm that it does help the flow rates of those stay more consistent, being all metal. Jams weren't super regular or frequent before I installed the All Metal Hotend, but they did happen. Usually it was either heat creep causing the filament to kind of bend in on itself and then start grinding, or just a complete clog in the nozzle, especially when I was using some less expensive PLA filaments. A couple times I had to completely disassemble the extruder in order to clear the jam. While I was doing that, I noticed that the PTFE tube in the stock Hotend would sometimes become really gummed up, and when I was printing ABS especially, it would become kind of like melty and burnt. So I replaced that. There's one extra that comes with the printer, and I ended up having to replace it another time. And then the final time when I took it apart, I was like, screw it, I'm just gonna put in the Micro Swiss All Metal Hotend. On top of that, the brass nozzle that comes on it is a little soft, so if you print anything with any impurities like cheaper PLAs or anything like strong PLAs with maybe like carbon fiber infused or glow in the dark PLA or something like that, it will start to bore that out and you'll notice some extrusion issues. I replaced it, I think, twice with other brass nozzles, and then eventually I just bought a hardened steel nozzle from Micro Swiss. And if you do the Micro Swiss All Metal Hotend, it comes with a hardened steel nozzle, but you those are different nozzles, so be aware of that. Other things I ended up replacing on the printer were this extruder fan. After I think about 4 months, it started to make a lot of noise and be just like super grindy. I think maybe the ball bearings or something like that went out in it. So I replaced that with a $10 24 volt fan off of AliExpress. And it's actually quieter than the stock fan, surprisingly. But note that this does run off of 24 volts for the whole system. So when you're looking at getting replacement parts, you need to make sure that they're 24 volts. A lot of similar rep wrap machines run off of 12 volts. So there's a lot more 12 volts heated beds and heating cores and stuff like that. So just be wary when you're buying new parts that you're getting the right voltage on those. But as I mentioned, there are a ton of replacement parts and upgrades for this machine, and I've already done a couple and started to do a few of them, but I will be doing a lot more, and I'll be documenting that whole process. So any of you that have this machine or thinking about it, I can give you a little bit of an upgrade path to help you decide whether or not you want to put more money into the machine. So the last kind of issue I ran into was some layer shifts, primarily on the Y-axis, and that's just when you get a skipped step when the y-axis is moving back and forth, and it usually continues printing, but you get these like layer shifts, which can be absolutely infuriating. I think I had about 3 prints in a row that happened on, and I ended up just cleaning the smooth rods on the y-axis and then loosening and tightening pretty much the entire kind of like drivetrain from the motor to the idler to the belts down there, and that cleared that up. It can also happen sometimes if the machine is getting too hot and or if loose filament or something like that kind of gets stuck. So what can this machine print? I'd say just about anything in terms of the actual physical models. You might have to do stuff like start to use supports materials and things like that, but that's kind of, you know, slicer specific things, and I'll talk about that in another video. I've printed everything from like little tchotchkes and figures and fidget spinners for friends, stuff to go on your desk, to you know, more functional stuff like the upgrades I mentioned for the 3D printer for storing things and stuff like that. I've also printed some more functional things like ring mounts for my speakers that go into my car. I've also printed some mounts for the LCD, the transparent LCD mod I've done on my gaming PC. I did start to print some props and replicas, like this is the data knife from Titanfall. By far, I think the thing I'm most proud of is this. This is a Ghost from Destiny. I sanded it and did a lot of post-processing, including airbrushing it and painting. I'd never done that in weathering before, so I learned a lot doing that. And then I've also added some electronics, which I'll try to show off in some B-roll. But yeah, I was able to produce this, and I think it looks absolutely great for somebody maybe like a cosplayer. I think this could be a very good machine in order to build some really cool looking props and replicas. Really, for most things, the biggest limiting factor is going to be the geometry of the actual model, which can get complicated, and the build volume of this printer. So something like the CR10 might be a little bit more attractive for somebody who's doing a lot of prints, but you can always scale things down and or slice them up. All right, so to wrap this bad boy up, I'm going to go over some general pros and cons of the machine that I found after using it for 6 months. Pros, we've got the availability from common retailers like Micro Center and Aldi, as well as online retailers like Monoprice and Amazon. The ease of setup is absolutely great. It does offer USB tethered printings. The touchscreen and interface are very good. It's a very sturdy machine. It offers a relatively small footprint. The print quality out of the box is very good. It offers amazing upgradability, and there's tons of mods available for it. It has a very helpful community of owners and forums on Facebook, and it can print just about anything you put your imagination to. But the machine does have some cons. Those include a bit of a price premium, but you can catch this on sale. There's a lot of flash sales on Monoprice's site. And also look out for open boxes, which are a lot of times perfectly fine. It doesn't have the best price to build volume ratio, and it can take a little bit of tinkering and modding to get absolutely quote unquote perfect prints out of it. So overall, I'm very pleased with my purchase of this printer. I'm still using it every single day. I was able to get it super quickly and get started with it and learn about 3D printing, which was my main goal. I think if you need something like build volume, you might want to look at the CR10. The Anycubic i3 Mega is an extremely similar machine with a lot of the same features and print quality, and even some additional features that you might want to check out, like power loss recovery and a filament sensor. But do your research, watch some other videos from some other 3D printing channels. There's a lot of the guys like Makers Muse, 3D Printing Noob, 3D Printing Nerd that have gone over this printer, and they might be able to provide some insights and experiences that I didn't run into to help you figure out whether this is the printer for you. But I do encourage you guys to discuss this 3D printers and other 3D printers and your experiences with them in the comments. If I missed any, leave those in the comments. And overall, tell me how I did. This is my first 3D printer and my first 3D printer review. So if there's something you would like to see in more detail, please let me know. As I mentioned, I'm going to be doing a lot of upgrades and covering those as well. I do already have another 3D printer in for review. This is the Tron XY X1, which is a small cantilever printer. So I've done an unboxing and build video on that that I'm going to be releasing soon after this one. So very excited to share more 3D printing experiences with you guys. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, give it a thumbs down. Subscribe to the channel for more 3D printing content and other stuff like PC builds and peripheral reviews and stuff like that. Check me out on social media. I have links to all my social media channels in the description below. I love chatting on Twitter and Instagram. I share a lot of behind the scenes on there. Thank you guys for watching. I will see you in the next video. Peace.